Okay, so Walzer is critical of the second premise of the argument from necessity. Remember, that was the premise according to which in war we're not free. And this was motivated by the idea that your actions in war are necessitated. If you're the conqueror, you gotta conquer in order to avoid collapse. You don't want people to see you as weak. And if you're the conquered, you have to give up. If the other side's more powerful than you have to give up or be destroyed. Your actions are necessitated, and so they're not free, and so you can't evaluate them morally. Walzer notes that there's two things you might mean by necessity here, the way in which our actions are necessitated. So one thing you might mean is that our actions are inevitable. Like the example of an alien taking control of your body and forcing you to punch somebody. But that can't be true. That's not true in the case of war, because it's really open to the conquering nation to not conquer. And it's really open to the nation being attacked to not fight back or to fight back. So it's not inevitable. It's not like they can't do one or the other option. Another thing we might mean by necessity is indispensability. And so indispensability in this case means that the action is a necessary condition. So clean water is a necessary condition for the survival of a human. You got to drink clean water or you're not going to survive. And the conquering nation might say that conquering is a necessary condition for the survival of the empire. They're not going to survive unless they conquer. But Walzer is skeptical of this. He says, look, there's a moral question here. Is the preservation of the empire itself necessary? And as a historical issue, people in the conquering nation can and do disagree about whether the preservation of their empire is necessary. And so that's a moral issue. Do we have to preserve the empire? And they could also disagree about the policy of constantly conquering. Maybe that's not the best way to preserve the empire. So one point he makes is that there's a moral question here. Is the preservation of the empire worth this other thing? And within the nation, they can debate that, and that can be a moral question. We can think about our own country and when we're involved in wars and how people in our own country disagree. Do we really want to do this? Walzer also says that this claim, the motivation behind premise 2, that exaggerates the knowledge and foresight of the generals fighting the war. How do you know there's no other possible way of maintaining power and avoiding collapse of the empire? And how do you know that this actually is the best thing to do? Sometimes empires stretch themselves too thin by constantly fighting. And so really what's being made, the claim being made here is a claim about probability and risk. They think that it's probable that they will survive only if they constantly conquer. But once you admit that it's just about probability and risk, then Walzer thinks that that opens up a lot of debate, and there can be a lot of options to explore. It's not that we've got these constrained options and can only pick one anymore. Once the debate about probabilities and risks begin, all sorts of moral and strategic questions are likely to come up. And for the participants in the debate, the outcome is not going to be determined by a necessity of nature. The outcome is going to be determined by people talking things out and debating and giving their opinions and raising moral considerations and practical considerations. And then they're going to make a free decision based on that debate to conquer or not conquer. So they've got lots of options. They're not just constrained. What's done isn't done by necessity. It's done as a result of hearing arguments and making free decisions in responses to those arguments. So looking at the past, we think that people do what they do out of necessity in war. But really, in the present, they're hashing things out and debating. Just like when we think, okay, do we pull out of Afghanistan or do we stay there? Do we go to war in Iraq or do we not go to war in Iraq? There's lots of debate, and people give arguments and reasons for each side. And it's not clear that survival goes one way or the other or hinges on one way or the other. There's lots of room for different possibilities.